Pipui for the introduction. Again, my name is Madison. My pronouns are she, her. I'm a project associate with HTAP, and today I'm going to be talking about the effectiveness of COVID-19 vaccine chatbots in 3 different countries, Thailand, Hong Kong, and Singapore. So to provide a bit of background, fairly self-explanatory, we all know that one of the issues that many countries faced in effectively addressing the COVID-19 pandemic was actually getting vaccines to people and getting people vaccinated who are very hesitant to accept these vaccines. So one of the contributing factors to this is what we call an infodemic. This is both a combination of just a massive amount of information that's being spread around, mostly on social media, but also person to person through news, about COVID-19 and COVID-19 vaccines. This is also combined with a lot of misinformation being spread around, so inaccurate information, a lot of inflammatory information, sometimes coming from presidents or national leaders who are tweeting. So it becomes very difficult to provide accurate and up-to-date information to citizens. This infodemics contribute to a lot of vaccine hesitancy. So this is seen a lot in countries in terms of numbers, so in terms of the available number of vaccines and the actual number of people who are fully vaccinated or getting booster doses. So one of the ways many countries or organizations have actually tried to combat infodemics, is by conversational artificial intelligence, or what we call chatbots. So these basically are services that are available through social media usually, for people to ask questions about COVID-19 vaccines, about the pandemic, so they can be provided with accurate and up-to-date information. So here I have an example of a chatbot that was developed by Johns Hopkins University called Vera. So in our study, we're trying to determine if chatbots are actually effective. So we want to assess the effectiveness of using chatbots to improve users' COVID-19 vaccine both confidence and their acceptance for their unvaccinated dependent family members. So a bit of background on the method. So we use a multi-site randomized control trial in those 3 countries, Hong Kong, Singapore, and Thailand. Our target population was adults with unvaccinated dependent family members. So this included parents of unvaccinated children, and then also adults with unvaccinated elderly family members, so usually a parent or grandparent of that adult. This study was ran from February to June 2022, so earlier this year. And here's a bit of an example of how we designed our study. So participants were randomly assigned into the control and intervention group, and they took a pre-survey. So this was about 30 to 40 questions asking about their perceptions on COVID-19 vaccines. So we wanted to determine what their vaccine confidence level is. So confidence is defined as their perceived importance, effectiveness, and safety of COVID-19 vaccines, and then also how accepting they were. And this was measured by their expressed willingness to get their child, parent, or grandparent vaccinated. Then we asked the intervention group to interact with a COVID-19 vaccine chatbot for a period of 1 week with a minimum of at least 10 interactions with this chatbot. And then the control group was asked to not interact with any chatbot for that week. And then they were asked to complete the same survey at the end of that week. Over on the right, I have an example of what chatbots we used in this study. So we have in Thailand, this chatbot was hosted on Facebook Messenger, and it was provided in Thai language. And then in Hong Kong and Singapore, it was hosted on WhatsApp, and it was provided in both English and Chinese language. These chatbots, while different, offered a lot of the same general information of commonly asked questions. So things like importance, necessity, safety, and effectiveness of COVID-19 vaccines, tips before and after vaccination, how to get vaccinated in each respective country, and then also a lot of information addressing common kind of misinformation that was being spread around in each country. So here, just to give you an example of how we actually scored these surveys. So for each response, it was scored from either 0 to 4, and then the difference was taken between pre and post survey. And then those were further categorized into 3 different categories. So a positive change was defined as an improved vaccine confidence or acceptance. No change in number means no change. And then a negative number was a deterioration in vaccine confidence or acceptance. So for this, I'm mostly going to focus on the results that we found in Thailand just for purposes of time. And I'm also going to mostly just focus on the results that were actually significant. So we used a proportional odds logistic ratio to compare between the control and intervention groups. Here we're looking at the results from parents of unvaccinated children. So in Thailand, this was children ages 5 to 11 because at the time of the study, this is the primary group that was being targeted for vaccination in Thailand. We had 65 individuals in the control group and 69 in the intervention group. We found that the intervention group was more likely to improve confidence in vaccine importance and effectiveness after use of the chatbot. So on these various statements, vaccines are important, vaccines are effective in reducing severe conditions, vaccines are effective regardless of manufacturers, and vaccines are effective against all variants. Those who were in the intervention group or who used the chatbot were more likely to show improvement after that week than the control group. At the same time, we also found that the intervention group was less likely to improve on their vaccine acceptance. So that, again, this was measured by their expressed willingness to get their child vaccinated. So after use of the chatbot, they were less likely to express their willingness to get their child vaccinated than the control group. Next, we have results from the adults with unvaccinated elderly family members, so usually a parent or grandparent. We had 73 individuals in the control group and 59 in the intervention group. We found that the intervention group was more likely to be able to debunk misinformation. So for this statement, COVID-19 vaccines were approved without completing clinical trials. This is obviously false. So they were more likely after use of the chatbot to positively identify this as false information than those in the control group. We also found that the intervention group was less likely to improve vaccine confidence after use of the chatbot. So for the statements, vaccines are safe and vaccines are effective regardless of manufacturers, they were more likely to show deterioration on these two statements after the week. So I'd like to just really quickly walk through some of the study limitations. The largest one that we struggled with throughout this study was the sample size. As you can see on the graph, so we have on the left-hand side, vaccination rate. At the time of the study, so earlier this year, vaccination rates in each respective country were very high and getting higher over time. So it became really difficult to recruit participants who actually had unvaccinated dependent family members. Specifically in Singapore, it was really, really challenging. So our sample size initially we had expected to recruit at least around 400 per group, so 200 in control, 200 in intervention, and we had way less than what we were hoping for. So a lot of our results were not actually significant, and it was challenging to actually get recruitment. We also lost a lot of individuals to loss to follow-up for people who didn't actually interact with the chatbot. Another limitation is that our participants that we targeted were serving as proxies. So this is a particular concern for the adults who were providing answers for their elderly family members. It's not as clear the association, their views on COVID-19 vaccines may not be as directly associated with the vaccination or views of their elderly family members. For children, it's a little bit more easy to make that association because they're making the decisions for their child. And then lastly, there were some differences in the actual chatbots that we use in the study. So the Facebook Messenger chatbot, which we use in Thailand, used what's called natural language processing. This is a more traditional type of conversational AI, where participants would just directly type any question into Facebook. It's a free-form text, and then the chatbot will read that and then spit out an answer. So they're reading the question as they go. It's called natural language processing. In the WhatsApp one, they initially started out with NLP mode, but they found that in the trial that a lot of participants were not particularly happy or they did not like the answers they were getting. So we switched to what's called browsing mode. So they had a preset selection or list of questions that participants would select from. So this means that the questions and answers were more accurate, but a little bit more limited in their scope. Whereas the WhatsApp, it was more broad. You could ask anything, but sometimes it's not 100% accurate all the time. If you've ever interacted with a chatbot, you know that when you ask a question, you don't always get the answer that you want. So in conclusion, we found that well-designed and implemented chatbots may have a positive influence on vaccine-hesitant populations, but it's not 100% conclusive from this study. And it's also not entirely clear what specific populations they may be effective in. We found possible what's called backfire effects. So for particular populations or individuals who are very, very hesitant, this may cause backfire effects, which is basically after use of the chatbot, they become more hesitant. So it has the opposite effect than what we want. And then lastly, we need more information and more studies to really understand how chatbots can be effective or how they can work. Great. Okay. Thank you. And ready for questions.
Thank you for your presentation. This is a very interesting study indeed. And so there is a couple of questions I would like to know is that, so the study only lasts for 1 week?
The intervention, yes.
Yeah, the intervention lasts for 1 week. So you don't really have time to update the chatbots according to the updates of the information. Okay, so I'm wondering, did you kind of define what's the meaningful differences in the scoring you receive? Because sometimes the average of the scoring, sometimes they can be statistically significant but not really meaningful. That's what I'm trying to say. And did you have a chance to further follow up what's causing that using the chat box might reduce the confidence in the vaccines? Yeah.
Okay. Maybe if I might have a clarification question on the first question for scoring. So basically every question or category was scored, and then we didn't take averages. So each question had its score, and then it was further categorized into just positive, equal, or negative. So we weren't averaging across questions for an individual. I don't know if that's exactly what the question was. But we did initially try and instead of using just those 3 categories, actually measure how much change happened, but we found that it wasn't significant. So then we just used these 3 categories. I don't know if that answered your question. Okay. And then your second question, if you can remind me, the backfire effects. So this, I think there isn't really enough, we didn't have enough significant results to really understand this more. I think it's difficult because a lot of our results were not significant. Also, our sample size was not large enough to really understand what specific population. So for backfire effects, the only thing that we found significant was that this was primarily a problem in very hesitant, so they had very strong views, and also educated populations. Those 2 had backfire effects or showed significance, but other than that, I don't think our study results we can't really understand exactly why this happens, and we need more studies to understand. Yeah.
Thank you.
I'm always very excited about trials, so it's really nice to see this. I'm glad you have words of caution on interpreting your results. You've got impressive odds ratios that you're showing, and I think there are lots of reasons why you're seeing that, and you have mentioned some of it. So for designs like this, what I think one of the most challenging aspects is contamination and adherence. So do you actually know in your intervention arm what proportion actually engaged with the chatbot, and to what what are the varying levels of engagement? And in the comparator arm, do you actually know whether they're seeking information elsewhere?
That's yeah, great question. And also I think some of our concerns. So the first thing, we did actually kind of cross-reference. So it was really easy on the WhatsApp. This was automatically included in the survey. We could tell if they had interacted with the chatbot, but we did not actually ask or read through the question. So we don't know. They could have typed anything into the chatbot, and we don't really know what if they were actually receiving COVID-19 information or I think for the the Facebook Messenger one, I saw a lot on the back end. People are typing random things in. So for we also checked on the back end of the Facebook Messenger to ensure, so they had to submit screenshots of their interactions, but again, we didn't check for like what questions they're testing. So that's definitely one issue with our studies. We don't really know. It's not limited. They're getting information from lots of places, and we don't know what necessarily the quality of this interaction. So maybe in the future, if we had more capacity or more time, I think also there was only a week of time for them to do the intervention. That's a very, very small amount of time for someone to drastically change their views. So I think in the future, it would be nice to actually score the quality of these interactions and then also increase the time that they're interacting.
So when you show us those results with the odds ratios, you're basically comparing what you observe at the end between the control and the intervention group.
Yes.
And were there any attempts to adjust for your baseline survey? In terms, because you've got your baseline survey, you've got your post survey, so there are differences between pre and post, and then you've got differences between your two arms. So have you tried to actually take into account of that?
So I sorry, I don't know if can you ask your question again?
So in a study like that, when you have pre-survey and post-survey, you can't just compare the observed differences between two arms. You've got to take into account the potential differences that you see at the start between the two groups.
Okay, I see what you're saying. Okay, yes. So I think issues with that was intended at the beginning is to really look at the baseline, but we didn't have enough participants. The sample size was too small to really see any differences, or the differences that we did see weren't strong enough because we didn't have enough participants. But yes, we didn't. We only compared between pre and post. We didn't necessarily just do direct across from the beginning.
So I would advise you to, and I don't know what you're going to do next with this piece of work and whether you're going to try and publish it or write it up. I would focus more on the process of setting something like this up, trying to engage people, designing the chatbot, and rather than present the results, because I think it can potentially be very misleading. There's actually very little you can draw from the results because of all the challenges that you have in this study. I do have one question. You mentioned that you aim to recruit 400 per group, because you talk about sample size a lot. Why 400? Why not 300? Why not 800?
So yeah, that's a good question. So I think if I remember correctly, initially it was 400 per group, so 200 in control and intervention, and then that's also 400 for adults with elderly family members, and then another 400 for adults of unvaccinated children. So this was from, to be honest, I'm trying to remember what the process was because it changed a lot over time just because we had to change the design a little bit as we went. I think that's what the team decided was enough to see significance.
Okay, so I would strongly disagree with that approach. So in a trial, you should have a hypothesis to understand or to an hypothesis on the effect that you want to see. So so my colleague here asked about meaningful difference. It could be that. It could be based on existing evidence on the size of the change that you expect to see. And then you calculate based on that the number of people you require to recruit to demonstrate that reliably. So it cannot be a number in the air or my colleagues came up with that nice round number. So you have to be very careful. So if you are going to improve on this and do another study like this, I would recommend you to really think about how you calculate the sample size. You need to have enough people, taking into account that you will have contamination, dropout, and so on, to actually tell the difference between the two arms. But you don't over-recruit, which pose burden on the people participating and wasting resources. So I think that is really important.
Yeah, okay, thank you. I think, we have some questions. Either person.
Hi, my name is Harlan. I'm here at HTAsiaLink2022, but I'm also part of the working group of the COVID vaccination delivery partnership and COVAX. if the point is really to increase vaccine confidence and ultimately get them to vaccinate their population, people who are not vaccinated, we usually, the framework is we're thinking of them either hard to reach or hard to vaccinate. And this particular work is supposed to only target the hard to vaccinate, right? So was that informing the way you select the participants? Or maybe are you planning to do additional subgroup analysis, as the commentator previously mentioned, only among those whose pre-surveys scored really low? Because those are the hard to vaccinate people in which this intervention is supposed to affect. Is there some plans for those work? Thank you.
Thank you for the question. So I think, no, we didn't necessarily, when we're recruiting, because it was so difficult, we just made the automatic assumption if an individual because at the time we were targeting groups where vaccines were widely available for all of these groups. So if they had an unvaccinated child or an unvaccinated elderly family member, we automatically assume that they're vaccine hesitant. We didn't do like further analysis or targeted recruiting. We may have if we found that it was easy to recruit, but it was very difficult, so we couldn't make further kind of targeted recruitment efforts. And then I think your second question. We haven't. We could. I don't think we'll find anything significant because our sample size is too small. We did in the other group, this is just a side note, in the Hong Kong and Singapore groups, there was a really high number of Indonesian and Filipino, I believe, subgroups. So they had a really high numbers of Filipino and Indonesian participants in Hong Kong and Singapore. And so we, for some of the analysis, took those participants out. That's the only subgroup analysis we did, but we didn't find there were any differences between those two.
I'll make it quick. Thank you, Madison.
Yeah.
Really nice talk. I tend to think the sample size and the search for significance is pretty irrelevant. What you're looking for is whether we should be promoting chatbots as an intervention. So I wonder if you've not generated some nice building blocks for a modeling study that would say, what's going to be the expected changes that we want to see? Are we going to prevent COVID infections? What extra resources are we going to bring in? And maybe you've got enough information to answer that decision question, rather than worry too much about if something hits an arbitrary threshold of significance, which I think is somewhat irrelevant to the adoption decision.
No, thank you. I think it's true. And back to what you were saying, I think most of our study is maybe less about overall like the effectiveness of chatbots and more about the experience. The only reason I would maybe be a little bit hesitant to broadly make statements about chatbots is because of the backfire effects, and we don't really understand. But I think we're hoping we can take the learning. There was a lot of learning in this study about how to actually create a chatbot. One of the largest issues we had is keeping chatbots updated. It requires a lot of capacity to do that, and so that was one of the biggest challenges that we had for the Facebook Messenger chatbot, is like keeping it updated over time with changing information is really challenging. I think, I don't know, it's also not really well studied about what type of chatbot is the most effective. I think there are different approaches. I think the Johns Hopkins one, initially when they first started, they were creating chatbots that had like emotions and used humor, and they found that was really not effective. So there's like, I think we can take this as an experience, but I don't know, I'm a little bit concerned about the backfire effects. That's like the only thing where I'd be hesitant to make blanket statements that we should be using this for everyone, or also for all populations. Okay. Thank you. Now we can all go to lunch.